conceptual, real, tangible. You do this in poetry as well. You do this in the Sharia does this. Our fuqaha do this often as well. But when you have something very conceptual, they like to give an example. So here we have an example. Let's look at this example. Whoever's emigration is for Allah and His Messenger, then his emigration is for Allah and His Messenger, and whoever's emigration is for some worldly gain, for which he can acquire, or a woman who will marry, then his emigration for that which he emigrated. So what we have here is one act. And this act is the act of hijrah. Hijrah, people. Lahza. Let me see if I can wear this. Like this. Oh, you better? Like this? Ah. Is it the way around? Oh, this one. I was thinking what's going on. This is much better. All right. I'm not used to this, right? Bismillah, let's begin then. So we were discussing hijrah. Hijrah in the time of the Prophet ﷺ meant something specific. Hijrah was to migrate from Makkah, leave your belongings, leave your beloveds for the sake of Allah, becoming a refugee, almost, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the sake of the religion. This was known as hijrah. So if you look at the example, you've got two people making hijrah. Prima facie, at face value, they're both doing the same thing. Both are doing the same thing. Both are leaving their belongings, leaving their family, leaving everything behind, leaving their homeland behind of Makkah, and they are going to Medina. So Zahiran, they both look the same, they both joined the same caravan. But the intention of both is different. So one of them is doing this for the sake of Allah. One of them is making hijrah, leaving Makkah, going to Medina, becoming an absolute refugee, leaving everything behind for the sake of Allah and the Rasul. And the other person is doing this why? Mentions here, he's doing it because he wants to get a better job in Medina. There's better job opportunities in Medina. Or mentioned here, a woman. So they mention stories behind why this hadith was mentioned. It said that there was a companion who wanted to marry this girl, but he couldn't marry her in Makkah. But then he thought, okay, if I become a muhajir, if I migrate from Makkah to Medina, I'll have better chances of marrying her. Now, whether this hadith is true or not true, whether the report is true or not true, but understand the example that's being cited here. Example here is two individuals, prima facie, at face value, they're both doing the same act. One of them is doing for Allah and Rasul, the other person is doing it purely for economic, material, personal gain. So is there a difference between the two? Do we see a difference between the two? We see a difference between the two, even though the act just looks the same. Even though the act looks the same. Because this is what this hadith is about. So the hadith, therefore, isn't just about intention, it's also about sincerity. The hadith here, though it's mentioned niyyah, though the hadith mentions niyyah, it's perhaps worth saying this, that niyyah and irada is another word, irada, want. In the early, let's say, when I say early usage, I mean the Quranic usage. In the Quranic usage, in the hadithic usage, that's what I mean by early usage of the word niyyah and irada, it's more in the meaning of what? Sincerity. This hadith, before it becomes a fiqhi squabble between the Hanafiya and the Shafi'iyya, do you make intention, you don't make intention, what does intention look like, all of that other stuff they mention in the books, is first and foremost about sincerity. It's about sincerity. Two individuals are praying. Two individuals are praying salah. Three individuals are praying salah. You can see them making qiyam, ruku, sujood, all the things we studied in our fiqh. But one of them is praying for Allah and the Rasul. The other one's praying because he's gonna get disciplined by his parents. The third person is praying because he's come here to meet his friends. He's gonna play football thereafter. The act is the same. Al-amalu wahidun. min haythu dhahir. As you can see, they look the same. But the intention, aka motivation, aka sincerity, differs. It differs, it doesn't differ, people. It differs. Wait, coming. I'm gonna talk about all this is gonna be discussed in good time. Is everyone okay with this hadith then? So look, based on this hadith then, we can say actions are only by intentions, i.e., actions are only credible, acceptable in the eyes of Allah by intentions. And every man has only that which he intended, meaning each person will get reward based on his intention. Now, look, if somebody understand this, Ustaz Abdul Khabir, if somebody made hijrah for economic purposes, is it haram? No, it's not haram. Earning a halal livelihood is an obligation amongst other obligations. But does he get the reward of a person who left everything behind and made hijrah for the sake of Allah and Rasul? No. Somebody who migrates to get married, in and of itself is not a haram act. In and of itself is not a haram act. Especially if he's getting married to protect himself from wrongdoing. So he's seeking chastity. And nothing wrong with this. But it's absolutely not the same as the obligation of hijrah that the Prophet ﷺ had announced during the time of the Prophet Sirah. Two very different things. Are we okay with this, people? Right.
So one of the criteria met that you have migrated to the city is it persecution? So there's this whole Soviet Union of Afghanistan, there were big migration of people moving to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and they were called the Muhajirs. Is that the same or?
Different. In Pakistan, muhajir means something very different.
But they didn't leave because of the Soviet Union.
Correct. Okay. Let's quickly. I'm gonna come to all of it. I wanna take each in order, so that way we're good, right? So actions are only by intention. We've discussed actions. We've discussed only. We've discussed intentions. Every man over here means woman as well. Both man and female has only that which he intended. Meaning reward and punishment is based upon actually not punishment, as we will see in the next hadith that I propose to read. Reward is given based on intention. Whoever's emigration is for Allah and His Messenger, then his emigration is for Allah and His Messenger. What does it mean it's for Allah and His Messenger? Meaning he gets the reward for it. Okay? That it's reward, and Allah and the Rasul recognize that, and He's rewarded in kind. But then let's turn to the question that Ustaz Abdul Khabir had asked, which is, what is hijrah? It's important we understand what hijrah is. Huh? What is migration? Going from one place to another place. Hijrah in the time of the Prophet ﷺ was to move from one specific place to another specific place. If I was to, if I'm able to give it the, okay, let's ask a seerah quiz. A hijrah was made from where to where, people? Just Makkah to Medina. Ahsan, right? So the first hijrah, or the first two hijrahs that were made during the Meccan period, was from Makkah to Abyssinia, to Habash. Why did they go from Makkah to Habash? What was the need? Persecution. So the early Muslims were not free to practice their religion, and therefore they sought a land in which they could practice Islam freely without persecution. So to put this in legal terms, in fiqh terms, it's migration from Darul Kufr, Darul Harb. So migration from the abode of kufr, abode of war, to Darul Islam, to Darul Silm, to the abode of peace, and to the abode of what? Of Islam. I'll come to it. because this is going to now we're going to talk about politics. When we say a land is Darul Islam, when we say a land is Darul Harb, when we say a land is Darul Kufur, what does that even mean? Does it mean that it's being governed by Muslims or non-Muslims, and therefore it's okay? No, no. So let's talk about the idea and philosophy of hijrah in the first place. This is what I want to discuss, right? The first and foremost, remember, the word hajara yahjuru in Arabic means to abandon, to leave. And the Prophet ﷺ himself mentioned in the hadith, La hijrata ba'da al-fathi. The hadith may even come in this book. La hijrata ba'da al-fathi. After the conquest of Makkah, after Fathu Makkah, there's no more hijrah anymore. And what was meant by that is there's no hijrah from Makkah to Medina. It's done now. Because the entire purpose of migrating from Makkah to Medina was persecution. Was it not, Abdul Kabir? Persecution, you mentioned this. But Makkah has now come into the hands of Muslims after the conquest of Makkah. Makkah is now in the hands of the Prophet ﷺ, hands of Muslims. There's no reason for you to migrate now. Finish. Oh, put it this way. There's no reason for you to, that religious migration that we're talking about, because a person can move for marriage, a person can move for job, a person can move to be close to the Prophet ﷺ, all this is fine. But the Shari'i hijrah that was meant, that we're talking about here, which is fleeing from persecution from place to place, this doesn't exist anymore. It's finished. But there is another hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-muhajiru man hajara amma nahallahu anhu. Al-muhajiru man hajara amma nahallahu anhu. The true muhajir is someone who makes hijrah from that which Allah has prohibited. Meaning the true migrant is someone who flees from sin. The true migrant is someone who flees from sin. So what we can understand from this is migration, Darul Harb, Darul Kufur, Darul Islam, Darul Silm, apart from who is ruling, is connected with being able to practice freely and fleeing from sins. So if you want to talk about Darul Harb, Darul Islam, Darul Kufur from a fiqhi, theological perspective, it comes down to whether you are able to practice in said land freely or not. That's what this is about. Are you okay with this, Abdul Kabir? Are you able to practice? Are you able to practice your religion freely or not under said lands? That is what a jurist, a faqih, is interested in more so than who has come to power. Who has come to power? So the idea that you can have a non-Muslim ruler who has granted freedom of religious practice expression at times can be freer, can be more of a Darul Islam than having a Muslim who's like a Marxist socialist who wants to ban all forms of religious expression. Like think of Tunisia or think of Tajikistan, right? Tajikistan, our neighbors. Huh? Uzbekistan. Yeah, because they're all like former Soviet. Yeah. Their ideal is Ataturk. Always. Ataturk, that type of ruler who's like ban all form of religious expression. We're just anti-religion. Yeah, we believe in ethno nation state. We have to be in a certain way and everything else, ban everything else. Versus being somewhere like here where you can wear what you want and do what you want and no one bats an eyelid. See, that's the irony of ironies that is discussed. Actually, they mentioned this in the books of fiqh, in the books of fiqh. Isn't it ironic that the land of the Nagus, the land of the Najashi, Abyssinia, is more of a Darul Islam than Makkah, Kaaba, Baytullah under Mushrikeen, Makkah, under the leadership of Quraysh, pre-prophethood, right? This is after prophethood. This is the pre-Makkan period, early Islam. So the jurists mentioned this specifically. They mentioned that if you are a better Muslim in said place than another place, it's better for you to be in said place. In other words, if you're a better Muslim here, if you're a better Muslim here than you are, let's say, in Pakistan, then you are in Afghanistan, then you are even in Makkah, Medina, it's better for you to be here. This place is more of a Darul Islam for you. Are we okay with this?
Well, Akbar said that he became Muslim when he came to Britain.
Yeah. People become, there's loads of these. During that time at least, there's lots of this. You know, I remember Rifa'a Tahtawi, who was a Azhar graduate, amongst the first of the Azharis who won a scholarship to study in Paris, in Sorbonne University. And he mentions this, I take it with a pinch of salt, right? But he mentions this. He says in France, he saw Islam without faith. So these people are practically Muslim. The only thing they lack is the kalima. You see, and he says in Egypt, what do I see? All of kufr, but just the kalima. All forms of corruption, all forms of wrongdoing is present in Cairo, but it's just that they read the kalima to the Muslim. We will discuss that at another point. When we discuss the hudud, I will have that conversation with you then. But I will say this much, just as an observation, I will make an observation here just so that we can move on smoothly and not take this in a direction that I don't want it to go. Which is that our plight, our circumstances are not coincidental. They didn't just happen. It's by design, it's by choice, it's by planning, it's by understanding. And if you want to know the roots of this, I say this as a student of history. Anybody who wants to know the circumstances with which we are met needs to read carefully the past 300 years, not the seerah. This also is a deliberate framing. This also is a deliberate framing, not by people who are sympathetic to our causes. Let me put it differently. We are so powerless that we don't even get to ask the questions. Forget the answers. The questions are being asked by others. So, for example, when certain people went about on a colonizing rampage and were met with resistance from certain places, unlike other places. So you can look at what happened in Thailand and Cambodia and compare it to what's happening in the subcontinent. Here, I'll even drop some names out, though I wasn't planning to. W. Hunter writes a book, The Indian Musalmans, post-mutiny, 1857, when you had the mutiny. And his question was, why is it that the Indian Musalmans revolted? Is it because there is something inherently in them that means they can never be loyal to the queen and to country and to the state? And the question always begins with the origins of Islam. So the question of why are Muslims violent always is asked by, let's go back to the origins of Islam. And Islam is inherently violent and this, without addressing the the humongous elephant in the room, which is colonization. Like, it stands to reason that you would always want to look at the immediate cause in order to explain something than the furthest cause. Like, I'll give you an example. If I ask Abdul Kabir where he lives, and instead of him telling me the most nearest answer, which is, I live in Brentford or I live in Ashford, he says, yeah, I live in the universe. Yeah, well, he's not wrong, Ustaz Ahmad. Why are you laughing for? He's not wrong. Is he wrong? I said, what's your address? I need to send you some. Yeah, put down the world. Put down the world. I'll live in the world. The world's not. So this is what I mean. If you want to understand your current circumstances, you need to read the last 300 years carefully, right? Starting with someone like Timur Lang, with Tamerlane, or starting with like the Portuguese, the rise of the Portuguese. Look at how the Portuguese come to rise. So what is the observation I want to make, Ustaz Ahmad? I'll make this observation just for you guys. Wherever Muslims live, They live in one of two situations. They live as a majority, they live as a minority. There's no third scenario. We either live as a majority or we live as a minority. Right? Where we live as a majority, we have a small minority thrust upon us that is not interested or that is not looking after the interests of the majorities. And where we live as minorities, we're being treated as fifth column with suspicion and so on, so on, so on. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make things easy for us. But this is what I want to say to you. So this equation of us being so stateless, of being so weak politically, isn't something that just happened. As this is the bit I want to mention. It's not that it just happened, but certain steps actively have been taken in order for us to reach in the position that we have reached. That's enough from me on this topic. Come, are we okay with this then? So we said so we've discussed immigration or migration. Abdul Khabir, yeah, we've discussed it. Anybody who wants to look into topic of migration, especially in the context of what I just mentioned, I would recommend Professor Yahya Misho, who's passed away now, rahimahullah, who was a specialist on. He passed away. Rahimahullah, he passed away. Well, maybe early this year or last year. He passed away. Rahimahullah. Yahya Michaud. So Michot. He's a Belgian French professor of Islam, rahimahullah. He's an absolutely wonderful person. He's a specialist in Ibn Taymiyyah and in Ibn Sina. So, he translated a lot of Ibn Taymiyyah into French, but near the end of his life, he also published in English. So he has a book called Muslims Living Under Non-Muslim Rule. Muslims living under non-Muslim rule. Published from Oxford. Not Free Press, is a private publisher in Oxford. Yeah. Professor Yahya Misho has a book, Muslims Living Under Non-Muslim Rule. It's a fatwa by Ibn Taymiyyah on the status of a city called Mardin, which is in modern-day Turkey, which had fallen to the Mongols. Right? Mardin, part of Anatolia, historically was considered Sham. So parts of Turkey today were actually historically in Arabic were considered Sham. Yeah. So Mardin was ruled by Muslims. Then it fell to the Mongols. So the people of Mardin wrote to Ibn Taymiyyah that we're no longer being ruled by Muslims. We're being ruled by the Khan, the Khanate. So do we migrate? Do we have to migrate? Or can we live here under non-Muslim rule? So he gives a fatwa. And the answer he gives is per to what I said, but you can read it in more detail. And the reason why it's important to read it, I feel at least that one, is because he also deals with ISIS, Al Qaeda, the more extremist elements, the more extremist thoughts, because it is said that the Al Qaeda, Wahhabiyya are all influenced by Ibn Taymiyyah. So you see the Al Qaeda ideologues almost confused, or not confused. They are so ideologically driven that they will say that Ibn Taymiyyah got it wrong. Ibn Taymiyyah here is mistaken. He can't have said this. So he deals with that. He deals with that. I think it is a good job. He does a good job in. I think this is something that he felt quite passionate about, which is wrestling Ibn Taymiyyah from the Wahhabis, from the Al Qaeda types. Yeah. So this is a different discussion. But anyways, hey, you can read that. I don't want to talk too much about this. Right? Come on.
Why did he put Malana Hadith?
Because he did hijrah uh, from his hometown, which is Tanabawan, to Makkah, because he was involved in insurgency, against the colonials. Yeah, that's what's said. So the British had a warrant on him of arrest, so he fled. Come. The two Imams of Hadith scholars, i.e., the two Muhaddithun narrated it. Who are they? Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim. All right. Shall we move on to the next Hadith, or do you want to read the commentary? I'll try and summarize the commentary for you very quickly. So, is everyone okay? Look, let's summarize the Hadith. Let's summarize the Hadith per the book. Remember, we said that Imam Nawawi rahimahullah is seeking to include what type of books is he? What type of hadith does he want to include in this book? Have you forgotten, huh? Holistic ones, right? Ahsan, right? Holistic ones. So this hadith that we read is a very famous hadith, hadith of intention. It's a hadith that many of the muhaddithun, many of the hadith scholars, if you went and studied hadith with them, they would start their lessons with this hadith. Many of them started their books with this hadith. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah begins his book Sahih Bukhari with this hadith. Yeah, several muhaddithun, in fact, had recommended that you begin your studies with this hadith. Why is it that they study? Why is it that they begin their books with this hadith? Because we said this hadith is about correcting your intention. It's about asking yourself, why are you studying? If somebody has the wrong reasons, for example, if somebody has the intention of acquiring worldly gain or personal gain, should therefore change his intention and make it for Allah and the Rasul. Do something for Allah and the Rasul. This is one. There are those who said that this hadith is half of Islam. There are those from our scholars of the past who said this hadith is half of Islam. Ask yourself this: how can this hadith be half of Islam? And there are those who said it's a third of Islam. So Islam then has three parts, and this is one whole third of it. So it's half of Islam because you always have two aspects to any act. There's the physical act, and then there's the motivation behind it. There's the physical act, like you're praying salah, that's ruku, sujood, qiyam. Zakat is the act of transferring money to someone. Hajj is the act of doing the tawaf and the sa'i and all the things that are involved. So that's one half of the act. And the other half of the act is what? The intention, the motivation behind it. Why you're doing this. So in that sense, it's considered half. It's half of Islam. There are others who said it's a third. Those who said it's a third have done so. If you recall, Ustaz Ahmed, when we were doing Kalam, we said there's three aspects. There's what's in the heart. Number one, what's in the heart. Number two, what's on the tongue. Number three, the actions, the physical actions. So in that sense, the intention is one third. There are others who said it's a fourth, but anyway, you get the idea. I think this much, inshallah, is enough. Okay, can we move on to the next hadith then? Can we turn to hadith number 37, please? 37, let's see what page it's on. Hadith number 37. It's a slightly longer hadith. So I will read it, translate it, and then we'll study this next lesson. We'll look at this next lesson. Al-Hadith al-Sabi' wal-Thalathun, hadith number 37, is given the title Good and Bad Actions. Good and Bad Actions. So, عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فيما يرويه عن ربه تبارك وتعالى قال إن الله كتب الحسنات والسيئات ثم بين ذلك فمن هم بحسنة فلم يعملها كتب الله عنده حسنة كاملة وإن هم بها فعملها كتبها الله عنده 10 حسنات إلى 700 ضعف إلى أضعاف كثيرة وإن هم بسيئة فلم يعملها كتبها الله عنده حسنة كاملة وإن هم بها فعملها كتبها الله سيئة واحدة رواه البخاري ومسلم في صحيحيهما بهذه الحروف. Okay. Hadith number 37, Good and Bad Actions. Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrated from the Messenger of Allah in which he related from his Lord. So this is a hadith Qudsi. Hadith Qudsi is a narration in which the Prophet ﷺ narrates from his Lord, in which he explicitly mentions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said X, Y, Z, and which is not part of the Quran. Otherwise, it's Quran. The difference between Hadith Qudsi and the Quran is that the Quran is recited, it's between what we call Mus'haf, what you find in the Mus'haf. This is not found in the Mus'haf, at least not by these words, though the meaning is upheld. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written the good and bad actions. And then he explained that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written good and bad. He's mentioned here actions, but he doesn't mention actions. This is Inna Allah katabal hasanat wa sayyi'at. Allah has written good deeds and bad deeds. Allah has written good deeds and bad deeds. And then he explains it. Allah explains. So what's that then? فَمَنْ هَمَّ بِحَسَنَةٍ, whoever intends to do a good action, فَلَمْ يَعْمَلْهَا, and does not do it, كَتَبَهَا اللَّهُ عِنْدَهُ حَسَنَةً كَامِلَةً, Allah writes it down with himself as a complete good action. وَإِنْ هَمَّ, where's it gone? وَإِنْ هَمَّ بِهَا فَعَمِلَ بِهَا, however, if he intends to do it and does it, كتب الله عنده عشر حسنات إلى 700 ضعف إلى أضعاف كثيرة. Then Allah writes it down with himself as 10 good actions up to 700 multiples of it, up to many multiples of it. And he says here, وَإِنْ هَمَّ بِسَيِّئَةٍ, and if he intends to do a wrong action, فَلَمْ يَعْمَلْهَا, and then he doesn't do it, كتبها الله عنده حسنة كاملة, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes it down as a complete good action. وَإِنْ هَمَّ بِهَا, and if he intends to do it, فَعَمِلَهَا, and then he does it, as in the bad deed, the bad intention, كتبها الله عنده سيئة واحدة, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes it down as one single wrong action. Okay, let's talk a little. Let's just summarize this so we're clear with this. So here in this hadith Qudsi, the Prophet ﷺ has identified intention. Intention of doing a good deed, intention of doing a bad deed. So you have a motivation to do a good deed, you have motivation to do a bad deed. So he says here, if somebody had an intention to do a good deed, so he had the intention, just a mere intention, and then did not do it, he gets a reward for it. So you get a reward for simply having an intention and not doing something. So you have good deed, you intended it, and then for some reason you were unable to do it, you get one intention. And then the hadith says, but if you had the intention and then you did it, then you get a minimum of 10 rewards, up to how many? 700. Up to 700. So that means for every act that we do, for every good deed that we do, for which we have intention, the intention you get one reward, whether you do it or you don't do it, and then when you do it, you get a minimum of 10. وَالْحَسَنَةُ, as the Quran says, وَالْحَسَنَةُ بِعَشْرِ أَمْثَالِهَا. وَالْحَسَنَةُ بِعَشْرِ أَمْثَالِهَا. For every good deed that you do, Allah will multiply in your register of deeds as 10. 10. But he says here that's the minimum. Minimum is 10. Up to how many? 700. He mentioned 700. So what determines a good deed being multiplied by more than 10? Sincerity. This is where sincerity comes in. Sincerity is the ingredient that will multiply the deed more than 10, up to 700. In fact, there are explicit narrations in the hadith and in the Quran that it's 700 here isn't like a mathematical number 700, it means multitudes. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إنما يوفى الصابرون أجرهم بغير حساب. بغير حساب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will compensate those who exercise patience. What does بغير حساب mean? Without account. As Abu Hurairah would say, when Allah says something without account, what would that number look like? What would that amount look like? Yeah. What would that amount look like when Allah says, I will give him بغير حساب? It's not my pocket, I'm going to give you 10 things. Right? بغير حساب, يعني حساب. Without any account. But then conversely, look at this. If somebody if somebody has hamma, if someone has temptation of sin, if someone has temptation of sin, and then he doesn't do that, he gets a reward for that too. So someone has an intention to commit a sin. That temptation, what does he do with that temptation? He resists it, he fights it off, he gets reward for this. And he says, however, if he follows that sin through, i.e., that temptation, if he succumbs to it, then only one sin has been written down. One sin. So this speaks about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This speaks about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in the short time that I've got left, which is 3 minutes, I simply want to go back to one thing in relation to hadith number 1, which is how do we make our adat into ibadat? This is really what will differentiate us, the common people, from the awliya. From the awliya. My teacher used to often say this, that we may even do more things than the awliya, action-wise, quantitatively. But qualitatively, we can never reach them. We can never reach them. Because for that one deed, they will have so much sincerity, they have so many good intentions, that Allah rewards them, as we said. Allah rewards them, as we said. Going back to this topic of intention, and the question that the brother asked, can you combine intentions? There's a whole discussion on this. But in adat, we can say yes. In adat, we can say yes. So for example, you wake up in the morning, you go to the bathroom. So when you go to the bathroom, you can make intention that I'm going to relieve myself in the way that the Prophet ﷺ did. I'm going to relieve myself so that when I make ibadat, when I pray, when I fast, I can do it properly without being disturbed, so I can have khushu' in my salah. You can come out of the bathroom. When you come out of the bathroom, you have again intention of coming out in the way the Prophet ﷺ came out. You can read the dua. Ghufranak, Alhamdulillah alladhi. Ghufranak over here means, Allah, I seek your pardon. What are you seeking Allah's pardon for? You seek Allah's pardon for being unable to make dhikr, to remember Him for the small time that you were in the bathroom. You seek pardon for this. Look at all the intentions that are coming through here, right? We're gonna brush our teeth. We brush our teeth because the Prophet ﷺ used to always brush his teeth, always keep them clean, so when he recites, it does not offend the angels. We're gonna do this because it is sunnah to make yourself presentable. We're going to do this. So you can combine all of these intentions with all these intentions that one act is giving you this many good deeds. I remember in one commentary, going to the mosque, the person had mentioned 20 intentions. And for which you get, so one act is giving you 20 deeds. Times that by 10. So 200 deeds, right? For one act of going to the mosque. I'm going to the mosque, why? Obviously, I'm going to pray, salah, pray with jama'ah, meet the believers. I'm going to smile because the hadith says smiling is sadaqah. So I'm going to smile in their faces. I'm going to do salam. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Like 20 I mentioned there, right? Combine all of these. That one act is giving you 20 deeds times 10. That's the minimum. So can you see how you are maximizing profit? You're maximizing profit and you're maximizing reward like this. And hence the hadith says, Niyatul mu'mini khayru min amalihi. The intention of the believer is always far superior than the act because of the multiple, intentions, multiple sincerities that we have over here, right? So the question over here would be, how can you be more conscious of your acts? And how can you infuse them with these intentions that would then yield you so much reward? And that really, if you're able to do this, you're from the awliya. You're from the awliya. The awliya on their daily basis want to see, how can any of my harakat and sakanat, of my daily deeds, how can I ensure that none of them escape reward? How can I ensure that things that we do on a daily basis, all of us are doing our chores, human chores. This is what I mean by adat. How can you convert your adat into ibadat? You do that via the intention. All of us, are we cooking? Are we cleaning in the house, people? Are we cooking? Are we cleaning in the house? Are we not getting ready to go outside? Are we not going to meet people on a daily basis? Are we not going to work? Are we not doing work? Are we not doing all of these things that we're doing on a daily basis that are mundane? That are mundane. If you have the right intention, they're all sunnah, they're all ibadah. All of them are ibadah. So your ibadat or ibadat, and your adat are also ibadat. And so you're abd. You're the haqiqi abd. Like this, you make what? Progress. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Any question?
He said the intention will be
Or better than his act, yeah.
is that hadith?
Yeah, it's a weak hadith. It's a weak hadith, yeah. Correct. Niyatul mumini khayrun min amalihi. Okay.
But you practice entering the mosque with the right foot, have a sincere intention, but over the years, it's become a
Second nature, but that's it. That's why you want to make sure that it remains a act of ritual. Yeah, I'll part with the joke. So Imam Suyuti rahimahullah has a whole book on this on the hadith of Niyyah, and he parts with this joke. He says that there was a big scholar, I think he was Subki, but I forget the name now. A big scholar. He mentions that whenever I would misbehave and my father would want to hit me, he would first make the intention. I'm going to hit him, right? So whenever he'd make the intention, I'd run away. So he couldn't get me. So even, just to give you an example, the Salaf, this is it, right? What am I doing? Okay, I need to hit my son. Why am I hitting my son? Because I'm disciplining him because of this. Right? By that time, the son's run away. We'll stop here. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallah bihamdik. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. See, even disciplining the children, you have to make intention. So, I apologize. Your answer will be given in full detail next. Do you have lesson next week or we on school holiday? Huh? I'll ask him.
It's here. It's here. So
Timetable here?
yeah, we are.
You're off? You're off? You're off? Okay. Oh, no, she doesn't. Well, speak to you about how so you sent me a
It's just like you're interested in the basics. That's the basics is I want see for me this is I love to have slowly getting the one that's been the main one. You don't have to do basically manage these things. It's not to manage it in a way I know a couple of people have that. So it's like a spreadsheet and move on to this. It becomes so much work. Oh, is that good? I would avoid people. once. Is that something? Yeah, it's so teamwork. Brilliant. They're all sitting together and playing away. You can have one of the mics. Just give the mic to the lady side. Yeah. For the lady side, yeah. They 100%.
First time. I've never done this. I'm IT person. I've never done this. Have you ever used AI in your investigation and research?
Yeah. What did you use it for?
I haven't used it yet. I was talking to I'll ask him about just you did this survey of Suleiman Nadwi. You wrote a book on the vocab.
Suleiman Nadwi.
Nadwi. Oh, passed away.
Okay.
The whole book is called the vocab.